At PTE Academic, we use AI for one very simple reason: to make the most unbiased English test we can. But how can a computer assess language as well as a human? Well, AI scoring means that it's not simply a single human assessing your English, but a very clever algorithm that mimics how human markers would score based on many, many responses. It all starts with our team of expert test developers. They create tests that reflect real-life scenarios, not just multiple choice questions, but essay writing, listening tasks, and storytelling exercises. We then ask hundreds, sometimes thousands of people from all around the world to answer the questions. Each response is evaluated by experts who rate them on things such as use of language, content, or pronunciation. These expert ratings become the sample data for our computers to understand what kinds of responses deserve what kind of marks. This enables the machine, using AI, to imitate the expert ratings and assign human-like ratings to responses. Put simply, that means that when you take our test, what you say or write is instantaneously compared with hundreds of previous responses and how they were scored. And because our test is built around state-of-the-art technology, it can be simply delivered and taken anywhere in the world, giving consistent scores every time. So when you sit down to take the PTE academic test, you're taking advantage of an algorithm that doesn't simply evaluate your skin colour, your gender, or your shoes, but that cleverly evaluates your English on its own merits. It's simple, really. Actually, maybe it's the opposite of simple: clever.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Hazrul from the English Language Teaching Center, ELTC, Ministry of Education, Malaysia, and I'll be your moderator for today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining today's webinar, which is the final installment of the 4-part Pearson-MELTA webinar series under the 10th MELTA International Conference in English Education, or MERCEL Online 2020. It's definitely a blessing to be part of this webinar series that is able to gather all of us across borders of different time zones at one online stage. Thank you to Pearson and MELTA again. Before we begin today's webinar, please spare me a few minutes to make a few important announcements regarding our session. Today's webinar will be conducted in 2 parts. We shall begin with the presentation of our guest speaker, followed by a Q&A session. Secondly, those who are present today will receive an e-certificate of participation. For this, at the end of the session, we are providing all of you with a link and a QR code too. So kindly key in your full name and an e-certificate will be generated and emailed to you within 7 days. For the Q&A session later, if you have any questions for the speaker, please send in your questions through the Q&A tab located at the bottom of your screen, and please include your full name, as the chosen questions will receive a prize from Pearson. So please look forward to that coming shortly. To begin today's session, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Associate Professor Datin Dr. Cynthia Yolanda Dodds, Vice President of Malaysian English Language Teaching Association, or MELTA, to present her welcoming remarks. Hello, Dr. Cynthia.
Hello. Thank you, Encik Hazrul. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all our participants around the world. On behalf of the Malaysian English Language Teaching Association, MELTA, and its president, Dr. Ramesh, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our 4th and final webinar in our Pearson-MELTA webinar series. We've had 3 very informative, interesting, and thought-provoking webinar sessions. The objective of this webinar series was to support English language teachers not only in Malaysia, but around the world. Now, MELTA would like to take this opportunity to thank David Booth from Pearson for taking the time to share how artificial intelligence is used in assessments and also how artificial intelligence can support teaching and learning. MELTA would also like to thank Pearson for their continuous support and contribution, a true friend of MELTA. Now, we also would like to thank the English Language Teaching Center for their support. This 4-part webinar series is a lead-up to our 10th MELTA International Research Conference on English Language Education, scheduled on the 7th of November 2020. Now, if you have enjoyed and found this webinar series useful, then I guarantee you will not be disappointed if you join us at the 10th MERSALT conference on the 7th of November. Now, with that, I would like to thank you all, and I would like to hand this over to Inche Azrul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cynthia. Next, allow me to invite Ms. Chia Suming, Senior Key Account Manager of PTE Academics, Pearson, Malaysia, to say a few words. Suming, over to you now.
Thank you, Inche Hazrul and Dr. Cynthia. Welcome everyone to the 4th webinar of our Pearson-MELTA series. On behalf of Pearson, thank you to MELTA, specifically Dr. Ramesh, President of MELTA, and Dr. Tay Pei Ling from the Special Projects Bureau for the great organization, and also our moderators from ELTC for their meticulous chairing. I hope the series are benefiting our teachers and their practice. We are joined today by David Booth, Pearson's Director of Test Development. I'd like to share a quote which I really like from David's blog. David shared that successful technology starts with confidence, and with confidence in the right technology, teachers can unlock access to new teaching methods and resources. For example, we have shared our free GSE Teacher Toolkit with you. Teachers now have access to the global scale of English software mapped to Cepher, and you can include relevant resources that are on the level into your lessons more effectively. So, new technologies are changing what is possible in the classroom, but how do they work? And how do we integrate them into our practice? So let's have David enlighten us. Without further ado, over to you, Encik Hazrul.
Thank you, Suming, and again, Dr. Cynthia, for your kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the month of Techtober, and what a way to take part in this month of technology by joining this webinar. The topic of today's webinar falls very neatly into this month's theme. The title of this webinar will be A Look to the Future, AI's Place in Education and Language Assessment. As you all know, ladies and gentlemen, AI is part of our everyday lives and promises to become ubiquitous in our homes, schools, and even our workplaces. But how are we using AI in education, particularly in the area of assessment? What benefits does it bring to students as well as teachers? That's why this webinar will look into how AI is used in assessment, and specifically how AI can help complete the circle of learning and assessment, giving immediate feedback to students to help make learning more efficient. We will also discuss the role of the teacher and how AI applications can free up teacher time for more meaningful interactions with their students. We will also look to the future to see what further potential AI has in order to support teaching and learning. So today we are very indeed privileged to have Mr. David Booth, who's the Director of Test Development for Pearson English Assessment. He is responsible for the development of specific Pearson tests, ensuring that all test development processes are executed to the highest standards, and that the test material is of the highest quality and fit for purpose. David works closely with other staff at Pearson to develop assessment and learning solutions to meet specific customer requirements. David's main expertise is in the development and revision of tests, and he has given presentations at major conferences on this theme. David has also contributed articles on specific test development projects in published research notes. David's other interests include corpus linguistics and assessment for specific purposes. Before joining Pearson, David worked for 10 years at Cambridge ESOL, a part of Cambridge Assessment. David has also extensive academic management, teaching and teacher training experience working for British Council in South Korea, Hong Kong, as well as in Malaysia. So without further ado, please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Booth. Good morning, David.
You. Good morning. Yes, good morning.
Yeah, it's probably morning there in London, right?
It's morning here, yes. But
how's the weather there in London?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. All right. Good. So thank you very much for spending and sparing your time with us today, David. Without further ado, we shall move straight to the presentation now, David, and I'm sure everyone is eager to hear much from you on the topic for today. Yeah. So without further ado, again, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Booth.
Yes, good morning, afternoon, evening. As has been said, I hope you can see my slides on the screen there. If there are any problems, please, somebody from the team, let me know. Yes, thank you for the introduction. I think the main focus which I would like to do today really is on teaching and the impact of AI on the teacher. So we're focused on that primarily. However, in order to do that, I think we need to look a little bit at the technology side, but this is not a deep dive into Pearson's technology. It's more a theoretical look at why we use technology in this way, and how that impacts beneficially on the teacher. So, as I said, we're talking about artificial intelligence and primarily in language assessment. I mean, there are wider implications for education, but specifically my interest is in assessment, and particularly language assessment. And as I said, what I want to talk about is how that use of technology impacts positively on the classroom. So how can we use the resources that we have and the technology that we have to have to benefit what goes on within the most critical area of learning, which is directly with the students, and I think a lot of that has become apparent in this year of very difficult crisis, for want of a better word, where the face-to-face nature of teaching has become even more important as we use a more blended kind of way of learning. Also, I want to look at how what the future looks like in terms of teachers and learners, and how they will be impacted by developments in technology. That I think is a little bit more little bit less certain, in that we all know that the technology changes that have happened to our lives in the last 20-30 years have actually been quite difficult to predict, and so some of the things that we're very familiar with now 30 years ago would have seemed to be a very, very strange thing indeed. So predicting the future is not something which is easy to do. Apologies, I went off screen there for a second. Can you see my presentation still?
Yes, David. Please continue.
Fortunately, I can't. Apologies for that. Let me see if I can get that back. Okay, apologies. Yes, okay, let's move on. So that's the agenda for this session. So I want to start off just with a quick question, really. So if people can look at the Q&A part of the on their tabs at the bottom, and if they can answer into there, and to what extent do you make use of artificial intelligence in your daily lives? So every day, a few times a week, not much, or never? Can you pop in A, B, C, or D into the Q&A response?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the question was on how often do you use AI in your everyday lives, right? So please key in your responses in the Q&A chat box over there, so that we can have a sort of like a poll, to respond to this question. To what extent do you make use of AI in your daily lives, right? So I'm just going to wait for a few more minutes, and maybe we can have the results by the end of the second minute there. All right, we're getting a few answers here, David. Okay. Some are saying they use it daily, David. Someone from Sri KL is saying that they use it every day. Some are saying not very much, sometimes. One or two person is saying never, David. So we have a mixed responses from here, but I would say majority are answering C, not much.
Okay,
yeah, David. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the problem, and it becomes part of the fact that I think maybe sometimes we're using AI and we don't quite realize, but I think more and more AI is becoming part of people's daily lives. But it'd be interesting to reflect for those people who said not much on some of the examples that I have here. And it may not necessarily be themselves who are using AI. It may be people in their family, for example, or other people around them. I mean, one of the main ways in which AI is used is in gaming. And so here you can see there's somebody using some artificial reality type software. And so this is putting somebody into a different context, into a different situation, and asking them to behave in a certain way. And I mean, young people today certainly are very much into the gaming technology and being, they want to be part of that alternative reality that these kind of machines and these give you. Similarly, I mean, we don't have flying cars as yet, but the technology in cars, a lot of AI technology is used. I don't know if people have things like reversing technology or technology that allows the car to know if there's a car coming quickly behind you. There's a lot of integration into this, and of course the move in very, very short order is towards driverless cars. And I just read a piece of this morning in the newspaper about how the insurance companies are worried about driverless cars on the roads. But this is, technology is already in, AI is already in a lot of the motor vehicles that people use. And also simple things like searches on the internet. How does a Google search come up with 10 or 15 top kind of recommendations, or how does it come up with those in a matter of milliseconds? So that this is using those algorithms and using the intelligence of the machine in order to prioritize those searches and pick out for you the most relevant thing that you're looking for. So a lot of AI is kind of hidden, really, and we don't realize that it's in the technology and it's in the things that we and our families are using. But to go back to more basic kind of considerations, we're going to talk about AI, but I mean, obviously AI comes from computing and the use of computers. And one thing I just wanted to reflect on is, you know, why do we use computers in assessment? What is the real purpose for that? And it doesn't directly relate to teaching necessarily, but you will see how it does relate to teaching in the end. But so why do we use computers in assessment? Well, there are a number of reasons. Obviously, speed is one. So computers allow us to do things much more quickly than was possible in the past. So again, we'll have our experiences of using computers, and sometimes computers take time to set up, take time to program, take time to get used to. But once you have got, you know, once you understand how the computer works, and once you've got the right kind of program, then it makes tasks, and we all know simple tasks. Calculation is a good example. Just just using mathematical calculations, they can do those very, very quickly. And of course, the more computing power there is in the world, the even quicker that those things can be done. Similarly, and related to that is, you know, it does routine things without getting bored. And this is important for us in assessment, because in assessment there's a lot of routine tasks. Marking, for example, of certain test items, you know, that is a routine task which you may have to do thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And I'm sure we've all been in a situation of examiners for certain tests, and you know, having to do the same thing over and over again. For humans, that can be boring, but for a machine, obviously, they don't care. The computers make fewer mistakes. Now, of course, computers make mistakes, and that's often when humans have mistakenly done something, programmed the computer wrongly. If set up properly, the computer will repeat those routine tasks again and again and again with a very high level of accuracy. And again, human beings have a tendency to get tired, to get bored, and that's when mistakes happen. Computers don't get tired, don't get bored, and so therefore they're repeating the same procedure again and again, and it gives us a high level of accuracy. And again, as you can imagine, these things are important for assessment. So we're in assessment, we're interested in making sure that everything is accurate and fair. And so in order to get accuracy, in order to get fairness, then machines are very helpful because they don't make the mistakes that human beings can. Similarly, in assessment, and particularly when you're using high stakes assessment, so when we're talking about qualifications which get you into a university or qualifications that help you go to a different country, these high stakes assessment often use very complex measurement models. So again, to ensure the validity of the scores and the high quality of the scores, there are often very complex tasks which need to be carried out as part of that assessment process. And again, computers really help us in making those complex tasks easier to implement. So what for a human being will be quite an extensive piece of work, I mean, certainly doable, possible, because the human being has established that complex task in any case. But the computer allows that to be broken down and to be made easier to implement. And I give a couple of examples. I mean, here, this is a mathematical equation which we use on a regular basis. We use on what we call on the fly, which means, you know, as in real time. Okay, so in some of our tests, we have adaptive algorithms. An adaptive algorithm is one that knows the level of the student, knows the language level of the student, or establishes the language level of the student, and then gives the student or the test taker questions that are at the same level or at a slightly higher level. People may or may not be familiar with computer adaptive testing, but basically what the algorithm does is it targets the student's level of language ability to get a very accurate measurement of their actual language level. Now, we use this technology particularly in our placement test, our leveling test, because the leveling test needs to be quick. Teachers and students and organizations want a placement test which is quick, but we also need it to be accurate. So we need to calculate these two things, theta, which means the language ability, and variance, which means how accurate do we think our estimate is of that person's language ability. So we use this is why computers can be very effective in implementing quite complex algorithms and processes in very, very short periods of time. So this happens instantly as the test is going on, and then allows the adaptive algorithm to work effectively. Now, you can't do that unless you have a computer-based assessment model, and unless you have it's not necessarily AI, but you need to have a high level of calculating skills. So when we talk about AI, I'm saying that's not exactly AI. It's kind of AI, but isn't. What do we mean when we talk about AI and artificial intelligence, and particularly in terms of the language testing and language assessment? So as I said, computers have been used in learning and assessment for a long time. And I remember when computer language learning, CAL, came out, computer assisted language learning came out in the kind of 80s, using computers to help students learn. Of course, things have moved on from there, but what's the difference between computers and AI? And the whole point of AI is that it brings together these three critical elements of computers. So computing power, the fact is now that you have in your hand, for example, you have a mobile phone, and that mobile phone has more computing power than a room of computers had in the 1980s and 1990s. So the ability to actually use data and to analyze data is so much greater than before. And that is the second element, data. There is so much more data around, and every time you use a computer, you know that data is being collected. You accept the cookies, and when those cookies are accepted, then the algorithms that sit behind these computer programs are collecting your data and working out about, what do you like, what's your interests in life, and they will use that data to present to you, for example, shopping things or holiday proposals. Do you want to go to Athens? I got the other day because I'd looked up Athens on one program. So the other program knew that I wanted to go there. So this is the data that we are in our everyday lives. The computers are collecting data relating to us and to other activities, obviously. And then powerful algorithms, which really are something similar to what I just showed you, but in fact that's not really particularly an algorithm. It's a mathematical formula. Algorithms are much more powerful in the sense that they are really programs or routines or sets of programs that allow us to analyze data and make decisions based on that analysis. So these three things together make up AI. And the critical thing from our perspective in terms of AI and assessment is that we start to get to a point where computers, and this is what people will know on this call as it's called machine learning, where computers start to learn for themselves. Okay, so this is AI really, when you're moving from the data, the powerful computing that you've got and the algorithms, and then the computer starts to learn for itself. So there's a bit of a continuum between computer technology, implementing algorithms and implementing high levels of data scrutiny, and then the computer starting to learn what it needs to do for itself. Now, for Pearson, the main way in which we use AI, and it's not ubiquitous, it's not the only way, but and I'm talking mainly here in terms of language assessment. So the main way in which we use AI is in this marking of speaking and written responses. So as part of our assessments, we ask people to write pieces of work, obviously, and to speak into the microphone, and we collect samples of their speaking. And we mark those using the technology, the automated scoring technology that we have. We also use adaptive algorithms in placement testing, which I've explained. So that's a way to make testing very quick and very accurate, is by using those adaptive algorithms. We also use the data And this relates back also to the teacher toolkit that Su Ming mentioned. So the global scale of English learning objectives are integrated into our assessment products, but also into our learning materials. So our books have the same spine, if you want, the same DNA as our assessments. And by integrating these two elements and using automated scoring, we can try to create this virtuous circle of learning. So where the assessment is giving us information about people's language in terms of the level of their language, and also in terms of where they are strong or where they are weak, or where they can make progress in their language learning. So this is an important part of using technology to link learning and assessment. And just to be clear, if you look talking about computerized testing is not just putting a paper and pencil test onto a screen. Computerized testing is about utilizing the power of computers. As I said, the processing power, the data that you can get, and also the algorithms that you can use. That is computerized testing. That is using AI in assessment, not just putting what was a paper test onto a computer screen. So I hope that seen there that in our daily lives we're using AI, and specifically Pearson using AI in order to impact positively on assessment, and that leads, as I've just tried to explain, into learning. So let's talk about the specific things about assessing language, speaking and writing skills. And I've particularly said there, so my concern is primarily around English language, but it's not the only language that is assessed in this way. There's the Dutch, and there's Spanish, and there's Japanese, and there's Chinese, all use this similar technology. But can I just ask you another poll here? So do you think artificial intelligence can be used to assess language, speaking and writing skills? Yes, but it has limitations. Yes, but it's not the best way, or no?
All right, again, ladies and gentlemen, this is your time to share your thoughts. Please, again, go to the Q&A section on your devices and key in A, B, C, O, D, and we will see your responses there on the question, do you think AI can be used to assess language, speaking and writing skills? So A is yes, B, yes, but it has its limitations, and C, yes, but it is not the best way, and D, no. Yeah, so please key in your answers, responses, so that we can see your responses to these questions, and later on David will reply. Yeah. All right, we can see David now. The participants are keying in their responses. I can see a lot of B, that means they are saying yes, but it has its limitations. A few C's, 1A. I'm not seeing any D here. Yeah, David. I would say majority are saying B. Yes, they think AI can be used, but it has its limitations. Yeah, David?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that would be the answer I would give, because we all know in any way of assessment there are limitations in what you can do, and this is still emerging technology, so it's still something that is being improved, and I think that's part of what I was going to talk about later in terms of the future. So there's a lot of things that we can do with AI that we're not doing at the moment. So there's lots of opportunity. So yeah, I totally agree. And C, I can understand C. Some people think that there are elements of language, for example, that machines are not good at assessing, and I can understand that point of view. And I've come across it a lot. I must admit, I'm coming across it less and less. as technology and AI become part of our daily lives, we tend to then think, well, of course, you know, there are applications within our working lives where this technology is appropriate. And and also, I mean, my point of view is always that the technology is there to serve the interests of the learner, in this case, the learner and the teacher. You know, that's how it should be viewed, rather than us being a slave to technology. But we all know, again, in our daily lives, that computers and other technology are now a part of our lives that we, again, wouldn't have imagined so many years ago. But yes, I agree with the consensus there. One of the ways in which we, and a good example there, I just had a beep on my phone there, so a good example of how, you know, we are being more controlled by the computer.
Yes, David.
I want to talk about what Pearson does specifically in terms of training the machine. So just like if you have an examiner marking a test, and spoken and written samples are most often marked by trained examiners, then clearly we have to do something similar in Pearson in order to support our automated scoring of speaking and writing. So what we do is the process managed mainly by my team is to train the machines. So, well, the data collection particularly is part of what my team do. So when we're training the machine, now you can imagine, and some people may have seen this before, it's a slide we've used a lot, but you know, when somebody says a sentence, and apologies, there's no full stop there. You know, my roommate never cleans the kitchen. You know, this is, you know, it's just a short sentence. It's out of context in this particular example, but you can imagine that in a conversation. Now, there's a lot of information and data that is in that simple sentence. So it's a sentence of 6 words. However, you can see from the different analysis of that particular sentence how much different information there is about the stress, for example, the intonation, the pausing, about those different sounds. So you've got the individual sounds, but also you've got the super segmental sounds, so at the kind of phrase level, how those sounds work. And you've got speed as well, and you know, as you see, so there's a lot of data and information which comes out of speech recognition software. And in the last 15 to 20 years, the technology and the behind speech recognition software has become much better and more accurate, and using models, deep learning models. So they're using AI models to actually analyze the speech. And this is how we work in terms of our speaking assessments. We analyze the speech using these automatic speech recognition models. But in assessment, we have to score. So we can analyze, but we need to have a score. We need to decide what that particular piece of speaking is worth. And so when we're developing speaking items, we are using transcription. So we do the automated transcription of the items, and then we look at those transcriptions, and we mark, human beings mark up the pauses and the elements of language that we're interested in scoring. So there's a transcribing process where we look at the language and we look at the features of the language of the students that are producing that language. And then there's a rating process whereby we are also scoring those particular samples of language. And these two elements are brought together. So the transcribing and the rating is brought together, and the system is trained. So the system is looking at these particular features that the transcribers have identified and seeing how they reflect and relate to the ratings that highly trained examiners have given them. So when we're developing the scoring engines for speaking, we are using humans to transcribe and to analyze particular utterances, and we're using human beings to rate those, small teams of highly trained raters. And we validate those again by using a separate set of data. So we have a separate set of data that we use to validate those, to see whether another group of humans would rate a separate set of test takers' responses in the same way as the machine did. So the machine develops the model, and then we test the model using other human raters. And we get, generally speaking, highly correlated machine scores. Now, where we don't get highly correlated machine scores for a particular task, then we would eliminate that task from our bank of items. So there's a quality control element here as well, where we don't get the high quality that we want. We will just eliminate that from the item bank. So as I say, we validate looking at reliability. This is just, we use a smaller set. So you can see here 158 sets of data. And then we look at what is the relationship between the human rating and the machine score. Okay, you see overall there's very little difference, and there's a little bit more difference around pronunciation and fluency. This is a quality check that we do on all of our items that go into the test. And writing, very similar. It's a different system. So if people read up on the systems that we use, our writing scores use a different system from the speaking scores. As you can imagine, it's a different process, and it's a different thing we're looking at. But the actual way in which we validate the outcomes are the same. So again, we use human scorers to look at the the samples of writing from the student. And then those scores are used to predict the human scores, and then again we validate that using a separate group of examiners and correlate and check the ratings between those two groups. So what we're looking at here is we've got the skills, the language skill really, which people believe comes from speaking, writing, listening and reading, the automated scoring, and then that pushes things through into the reporting. So the online score reports and paper score reports, and that's where the benefit is to the teacher. So by linking things through the global scale of English, then we get benefits to the teacher in the long run. Okay. Just very quick, because I know looking at time here, we've probably got another 10 minutes, but we'll take questions. So, but there's just one quick poll here. This is the last poll, actually. So what do you think is fairer, assessment by a trained examiner or assessment by a trained machine? A or B?
Right. Thank you, David, for this last poll question. So ladies and gentlemen, if you can kindly go to your Q&A section there, where you can key in your response to this question. What do you think is fairer? Okay, assessment by a trained examiner or assessment by a trained machine? So if your answer is A, it's going to be trained examiner, or if you choose trained machine, your answer will be B. Yeah. So you can kindly note A or B in that live event Q&A. All right, we're getting responses, David. Right, I would say, David, looking at these responses, it's a mixture of A and B, but I would say a slightly more A's than B's.
Yes,
yeah.
And that's what I would expect. You know, I think there's still reticence amongst teachers about assessment by a machine, and there's still. I think, you know, the reason is because assessment by an examiner is the status quo. It's what people are used to. Assessment by a machine is something relatively new. So it takes time for people to kind of come round to that idea in a sense. And I mean, I use this slide a lot, but, you know, and I've worked with examiners. I mean, I examiner myself, an IELTS examiner, Cambridge examiner for many years. Also, I developed training materials for Cambridge exams, including Beck and Bullats, which I was working on when I was at Cambridge. You know, I have been heavily involved in examiner training for years and years. And to be frank, you know, when you look at it and when you look at the data coming out from that, you know, human raters are by their nature generally less reliable than machine rating. So in terms of fairness, you know, my view is that the machines give you that level of consistency that you need. And there are many reasons why human raters can't do that. I mean, we talked about tiredness and we talked about getting bored of routine tasks. But similarly, just by trying to apply the ratings consistently yourself, trying to, whether you and the group of people or other assessors are also applying the ratings in the same way, it's not very likely. Examiners don't like to use the top and the bottom of the scale. Examiners, when you're looking at different criteria, then what the first mark you gave can often impact the second mark and the third mark. It's called the halo effect. Bias. I mean, you know, human beings are more likely to exhibit bias than a machine. So there are a number of reasons why, and I call this challenges for human scoring, because what happens when assessment specialists and when test developers like myself are looking at this area, what we're trying to do if we need to use human scorers is we're trying to overcome these particular challenges. So, apologies, sorry, what do teachers do best? Well, not this is the answer. So here you've got somebody, and this may be a familiar picture to people, you know, who's grading papers and putting the marks into the register, as I used to do when I was a teacher. You know, test every 4 weeks or test every 2 weeks. How are they making progress? You know, I had to write my own tests, mark them. You know, this is not effective use of teacher time. You know, teacher is most effective when they are giving feedback and when they're giving immediate feedback to their students. So language students learn most effectively when they're getting feedback from the teacher. So this is not an effective use of time. What we're trying to do with the AI in terms of Pearson is, as I said, link up the assessment with the learning. So what we're trying to do is say, right, okay, this is what a student can do. The AI helps us to do this quickly, and you know, almost instantaneously we can get these results in terms of the student's performance, and we can look at how well they're doing on different skills. And also what we can do is give summaries, and this is pulled, all this information is pulled from the global learning, the GSE, the global scale of English. So we can pull this data, and this can help, you know, look at a particular student, where their strengths and weaknesses are and where they need to improve. And that can be linked into courseware, because as I said before, the global scale of English we use for the assessments and also for the courseware. So this, on this slide, you can see there's a book that they are learning Big English, and where the performance of the student is shown, you can also pick out areas from the book that can be used to support their learning. So you can see there under listening, there are listening activities which are right. So this student is not done well in listening. There's a summary of how well they've done or what their weaknesses and strengths are. And there's also some examples there of things that they can do in order to improve in that area. So what the purpose of these reports is to give remedial work. So how can they improve something that they're not good at, but also stretch. So how can they get better at areas that they're already doing well at? So you can see there, this student is doing reasonably well at reading, but in the bottom where we got their dot 4, you can see there that there are other suggested learning objectives there that can improve their reading. So it's not just about making, you know, remedial work, but also about stretch. Where can they really improve their language ability? And you know, you can see using the test, you can see how well they're doing over time. So they can take the test 1 or 2 times, and then you can see in this particular class, I mean, also as part of a class, obviously, but you can see how well they've done and whether they've improved or not. And as I say, it's part, you know, a teacher can use this at the class level, so they can look at their whole group of students and how well they're doing in these particular areas. And that's all linked back to those performance summaries and assessment activities. So things that describe the student's general level of performance and what they can do in order to improve in a particular area or to stretch their ability. And similarly, if they're studying a book, so again, here we've got Big English. If they're studying a book, then again, they can actually have specific activities and language activities from that book, but also other learning objectives that the teacher can look at and devise their own or find their own material in order to improve those students' particular areas or to push them further to a higher level. So this is the product of what we're talking about there. It's the product of having the integrating artificial intelligence into the assessment to get the speed and get the accuracy of results that are required, and then using that data, pushing that through in order to show the teacher where the students need to focus their work and focus their language learning. So that's the power of the AI is not really in just a quick score, but the power of the AI is in using that information to drive learning and to give the teacher the information that they need in order to be more effective in the classroom, doing what they do best, which is interacting with the student and giving the student feedback. And this is very helpful, very supportive feedback, giving the students feedback on what they have learned. And for some people, of course, parents are important. For younger learners in particular, for children, parents are an important stakeholder group. So that again is a report that can go to the parent. It can be in their own language, which tells them about their child and can also give them information about what they can do, because a lot of parents are concerned about their children's language learning and want to help, want to support their children in that activity. So it's not just about teachers and learners, it can also be about parents, and of course they have a big impact, as we all know, on the children's learning and on the children's motivations to learn. Okay, I just want to take one more minute to talk about the machines, because this is an interesting aspect, and I think something that is interesting for testing and about the future. So, you know, a lot of tests and we have tests ourselves, Pearson. I'm not claiming this is other test providers, but you know, a lot of tests have this kind of outlook. You know, do a test in listening, reading, speaking, writing, add it up. What's the score? But you know, there's severe limitations in this type of approach. I mean, just take listening at the top, for example. So if people do a listening test, and you can see a little bit from the picture, you know, okay, they have to listen and they also have to read, because they've got to read the questions. They've also got to write, because they've got to write the answers. So whilst you've got a listening test, in fact, in that listening test, you're using at least 3 out of these 4 skill areas. Similarly, speaking, you know, you get a speaking test, you have to speak, but in order to speak, of course, you have to listen. Okay, but you know, that performance and what you did in that exam and that part of the exam, that 15-minute interview, goes down as your speaking score. But it isn't just speaking. There's lots of other things going on. So, you know, this approach, this very, very compartmentalized approach, is not a good thing. Now, what computers allow you to do, and apologies for this diagram, but what computers allow you to do is to use items which score more than just one skill. So you get test items which score speaking and listening at the same time, or you get test items which score reading and writing at the same time. So having this integrated skills, this actually is just a placement test. This is just a level test here, but you can see the complexity. The top and the bottom rows are the items themselves, the item types, and the middle rows are all the different skills that are being tested. So you can see that even for a simple placement test, you can have a much more complex picture using computer-based assessment, properly, using all the things in the technology that you can get a much better picture of a person's language ability, much more accurate. So quickly, yes, going on to the future. So I think that's one of the big things that testers have to do, is actually, look at current forms of assessment that are considered to be, high quality and considered to be the best of class, but actually look at them critically, because a lot of tests that we use today actually underrepresent the language ability of students. We need to look at context-driven assessment, and this is very true for AI, making sure what we need to do is put we should be testing language in context, so where language is used appropriately and in the context in which it's used. So the AI can help us to do that in a more meaningful way. And also accuracy. Fairness is about accurate scoring. And again, I think that technology can help us with that and support us in making sure that we're giving, when we're feeding back to the student, that we're actually telling them something which is valuable and useful and also true, rather than overgeneralizations of language performance. Bias, we need to end bias. There's a lot of human raters by their nature tend to have issues and problems, and no amount of training will get over those particular issues. And the feedback is what I think is so important, that we need to have that feedback loop, going back to the teacher, going back to the student, and saying, this is where you could work more effectively. This is how, if you focus here, you will learn more quickly. So and we need the data as well to show the teacher and the student that is effective. So this is the information, use it, and then see what happens. And freeing the teacher. The teacher is the critical piece in learning. The teacher is the one that has most impact on a learner. They can learn books, and they can learn on videos, etc., etc. But in most of our societies, in the way that they're organized, the teacher is the person who is the most effective person in fostering learning of language. So yeah, maybe augmented reality, maybe smaller machines, things on mobile. These are possibilities. Who knows? I mean, but there's a whole host of things that we should be trying to do to improve our assessments and to make them relevant and more relevant to students, and now and in the future.
Right. Thank you very much, David, for your lovely session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, artificial intelligence, or AI, is certainly not a thing for the future. The future is now, and AI is really becoming part of our lives, and our lives has been impacted quite significantly by AI. And I'm sure this session has enlightened us all, especially on how educators can leverage on the power of AI in education, as well as specifically in language assessment. Without any delay, we shall now continue the webinar with our Q&A session. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the chosen questions will receive a prize courtesy of Pearson. So thank you very much, Pearson, for sponsoring the prizes. Ladies and gentlemen, David and I have chosen 3 questions, right? So are you guys ready? The first question is one of the running team. We have received a lot of questions here, David, and we have chosen this particular one because it's connotates really well with our context. It's actually from Jessica, yeah. And Jessica asks, how do you account for bias or biasness in the way AI assesses language skills? I'm assuming here, she even gave an example. Will a non-native speaker, yeah, David, will a non-native speaker be disadvantaged in a speaking test due to their accent? This resonates very well with our teachers and even students here in Malaysia. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, it's a very good question, and I mean, one thing that we try to do in Pearson is we try to use the expertise and you know, we try to use academics and people who know about language and as informants, and one of the key people that we work with, unfortunately now has passed away, was a great expert in terms of native speakerness, and you know, the role of the native speaker in language education. And people who've been in language education for a while will know, you know, it's not necessarily a positive one. What we focus on is not really the native speaker competence, but the highly proficient speaker. So it's not somebody who is, for whatever reason, coming from a particular country, but somebody who's got a very good grasp of English language. And that is what the models are based on. So all our models are built out of language learners. So we use language learner responses from those who are highly proficient to those who are less proficient, and we use those particular samples of learning to develop our assessment models. So we don't have a native speaker aim, if you want. We don't have that is not the standard. The standard is a highly proficient speaker of English. And I'm sure on this call here we've got many of those people who would fit into that category. So yes, that's the standard. Now, in order to deal with accents, yes, we have to sample very widely. So we sample across the test population. So wherever people are taking the test, we use those examples from those particular students. So we use actual students who are doing the test to train our assessment engines.
Right, David, thank you very much for that response. And the second question, David, relates to something that you've touched on just a little bit on your presentation just now, but maybe will benefit from a little bit of examples maybe, and also further clarification. This one is coming from Mageswari. And she asks how AI can be taught to pupils, focusing on moral values and life lessons, not necessarily just on the language skills, but also on the this intangible values and morals. How do we do that? David?
Yeah, to be frank with you, I think AI is not the vehicle for that. In terms of language assessment, the AI is really there as the unbiased arbiter. You know, it's helpful in that context. It's helpful because if you're talking about language, the teacher can say, well, you know, your English is here. However, you know, you've been great in the class and you've been helping other students, and you know, you're very good in doing group work and things like that. So the teacher can be really effective in feeding back to students on that level, in terms of their behaviors, in terms of their attitudes. But all that the AI assessment gives you is that data which can help you in other ways. You know, however, look, your score's 45, other students scoring higher, you really need to apply yourself in these areas. So I think, directly no, but indirectly it can be of use because it frees up the teacher to do the things that the teacher's good at, which is exactly those things.
All right, thank you, David. And our last question here, it's actually one of the earliest questions, but the follow-up questions after that from the other participants really are using the same theme. The big question here is, David, will AI eventually replace teachers? And to what extent will AI be used in teaching and learning? And they are concerned of, how a teacher can strike a balance now that you have AI integrated, maybe digital tools in the classroom. But at the same time, there's a fear of using AI. The fear will be eventually AI will replace, automation will replace teachers. How do you respond to that?
And that is a fear, and you see that fear coming out in different contexts. I mean, there's a lot of discussion in Australia, for example, around this particular topic, and people have been following that. Different experts having different views on the extent to which, automation will impact on the teaching profession. we all know that this is not new, you know, that lots of different technologies have come in over the years, and people have found that maybe a threat to what humans do, and there are jobs that don't exist now that existed in the past, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main focus that I would have is that all the evidence suggests that the key element of learning, the key impact that teachers have, is in terms of feedback. So using the knowledge that they have, using the evidence that they have to help students to indicate areas where they can learn. And I think it's very difficult for machines to do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that human interaction, the human interface, the dealing with students as human beings, motivating them, praising them, giving them the right tools, developing them as people, not just, I mean, you know, education is, as I said, I'm dealing here with language assessment, but education is that much wider context that we're working in. And we have to give people the tools, and language is one of them. You know, language is one of them that gives people success in their lives. So we have to focus on that. But I don't think the teacher is in danger, certainly not in the near future. I mean, maybe in some sci-fi reality, perhaps, but certainly not in the lifetimes of most people on this call, I would think.
All right. I forgot to mention who was the one who asked this question. It was actually from Alia Abdullah. Yeah. But thank you again, David, for that lovely feedback to all the questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the Q&A session. Thank you again, David, for answering all the questions, and a very big thank you for joining and sharing with us today. Yeah, thank you very much. We also hope to see you again sometime soon, hopefully in person. Any final thoughts from you, David?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm very keen. I was booked to come to the region earlier this year, and that's been postponed to next year. I've got a great affinity for Southeast Asia and Malaysia. I love Malaysia, so I'd love to come back there.
All right, thank you again, David. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end, I would like to once again invite Su Ming to share a few words. Take it away, Su Ming.
Thank you, Hasrul. Thank you, David, for the valuable insights on how AI supports the cycle of learning and teaching. I'd like to reiterate what David said in terms of AI. I mean, the AI, the Pearson assessment, and the information that we have, it's to help you provide efficient feedback to learners. And our AI applications can contribute to free time and help you to have more meaningful interactions with your learners. So just to give you a few statistics, Pearson runs more than 125 million assessments every year, and our assessments are reported on GSE, the Global Scale of English, and it's mapped to CEFA for all ages and stages. So with so many assessments in the market, how would you choose the right test to use? To make it easy, zero in on the purpose you're using the assessment for. Are you using the assessment solution to place, benchmark, certify, or verify? So it's a different solution sometimes for different purposes. For example, PT Academic, our high-stakes computer-based test, uses AI technology and is used to prove or verify English skills for university, professional, and migration applications in 100% of universities and colleges in Australia and New Zealand, and also by the governments for all visa pathways for work and migration. In Malaysia, it's highly recognized by MQA as a language test for international student entry into Malaysia. And PT Academic UKVI is approved by the UK Home Office for all visas requiring a secure English language test for study, work, or migration. If you're planning to use another test, like for example, a placement test, then a different test would be used. For example, the Pearson English Placement Test. In closing, we hope you have thoroughly enjoyed and benefited from our Pearson-MELTA webinar series. At Pearson, we really want to feel supported, inspired, and know that there are plenty of resources available at hand to help you be ready to move forward anytime. So Do join our Pearson ELT teacher community, and here's wishing you all the very best in your journey of learning and transformation, especially for 2020 and 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suming. Right, ladies and gentlemen, if you want the correct solutions, Suming has shared with you a few solutions from Pearson that might solve your issues or problems. Next, once again, yeah, we would like to invite Dr. Cynthia to share a few words as well. Dr. Cynthia? Yeah, your mic, please.
Do it again. All right. Okay. Thank you, Hasro. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, David, for that interesting presentation. Showing what the future holds for testing. It also finally confirmed for me that computerized test is not just transferring the pencil and paper to the pencil and paper test to the computer. Well, it looks like AI is here to stay, and we as teachers need to be very brave and embrace it. Also, I felt what was very useful was the insight for teachers on how it can be useful for us, especially feedback. And I think, I've noticed as well, being an educator myself, that once students get feedback, it helps them a lot more. And if AI can do that, then we should embrace it. Now, once again, David, thank you. Melta would like to once again thank Pearson for their support for this webinar series. Also, a very special thanks to the Melta's Special Bureau Committee led by Dr. Teh Pei Ling for taking the lead in organizing these webinar series. Now, finally, to Encik Mohammed Hazrul for an excellent job moderating this session. Now, Melta hopes very much to see all of you at the 10th MERSALC conference on the 7th of November. Now, please visit our website for details. Right. Once again, thank you, take care, and stay safe.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of our webinar. Before we end, please remember to access the following links and fill in your full name to generate your e-certificate of participation, which will be emailed to you very soon. Right, that one is the first QR code. The second QR code will be a link to the survey. So please complete the short survey too. Pearson would get in touch with the prize winners of our of today's Q&A session via email very soon. So congratulations to the 3 winners. And finally, please remember that the recording of this entire webinar will be made available on the MELTA YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, and also on the Pearson website. So please share this information with your colleagues and friends, as well as more people, so that more people can benefit from this session. The organizers would like to thank our wonderful speaker today, David Booth, and thank you for joining us. And we do hope that you are able to take away a lot of useful information and new ideas with you. So I'm just going to leave these 2 QR codes for another maybe 2 to 3 minutes before, so that you can do the registration as well as the survey. Yeah. All right. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Take care and stay safe.